All right, so I want to follow up and do a breakdown of the ARP spoof and the DNS spoof to kind of show you a little bit how that works. So let's jump right into that. So essentially, before the attack happened and how these two communicate is the first computer basically has to send an ARP request to the entire network, and that's what you see happening there. Step one is it's ARPing everyone saying, hey, who is 172.16.78.2, which is the gateway? Tell me that MAC address. Everybody gets that request, but the only person that's going to respond to it is going to be computer 2, or the router over here actually. It's going to respond and say, hey, wait a minute, I'm .2. And my MAC address is, 00cc 29848cf1. That reply makes it over to the victim, and the victim responds and says, great, got the message. I'm going to record that information in my local ARP cache, which, as you can see right now, has a question mark because he doesn't know how to get to .2. And then you see in step 4, the router will say, all right, I got it. You got my information. Now I'm going to request an ARP from you so that you can tell me your MAC address as well so I can get to you also. So once that happens, the next thing you see is now their ARP cache is populated with the right information, and that's how they're able to get to each other. All right. And then the next step is the attacker would then start to do what we call ARP spoofing, where the attacker would send an ARP reply that says, hey, 2 is now at my MAC address, and it would also send the reply to the router saying, hey, 172 is at my address. So he's pretending to be the router to the victim, and he's pretending to be the victim to the router. All right, and that is basically what sets up the ARP poison to put this attacker in the middle. Now you will have to, in the middle machine, do a step called IP forwarding or turning on IP forwarding. It's just a simple Linux command, or in Windows, it's a registry key change. You're just enabling IP forwarding. Then after you've done that, now you're in a state where you can do the DNS spoofing. What you see going on here is essentially the computer basically saying, hey, where is facebook.com? That is a DNS query that would be going out through the router to the DNS server, or in some cases, the router would be the DNS server. But either way, remember, that's being intercepted by the attacker, who's going to just pass it on to the DNS server. DNS server responds and says, oh, Facebook is at 57.23.45.12. Well, once that reply goes from the DNS server, then makes it back to the attacker who's put himself in the middle, DNS spoof on the attacker machine will then modify that reply and make it say that, the Facebook is at that 190 address. And this is how the victim now, on top of having their ARP spoof cache, and they've now got their DNS cache, poisoned as well. And therefore, when they try to go to Facebook, they end up at the attacker, which is what you saw in the previous video. That's how I set all that up. Just wanted to dive in a little bit and show you what the process actually looked like. Because let's examine it actually in the ARP cache on the victim. So if we look at the victim's ARP cache currently, you can see that the ARP cache looks, pretty much just fine. There doesn't appear to be anything bad going on there. It all appears to be, perfect. Nothing bad going on, nothing wrong with it. But now if we go over and start the ARP poison, I want you to pay close attention to the IP and MAC address mapping for the gateway there, which ends in F3, F6, FC. So as soon as I start the ARP poison, let's go over to the attacker and do that. So on the attacker here, you can see that my IP address is 191. So if I start my ARP poison, and this is literally the same Windows and everything that I used for the actual attack part of this earlier. All right, so if I start my ARP poison, and I tell the gateway that I am the victim, which was 172, and then I simultaneously tell 172 that I am the gateway, like so. So I'll start spoofing this one first. And you can see it's already sending that lie out. It's saying .2 is at this MAC address that ends in 37BD. But it's also, when I go to this other terminal here and do the ARP spoof in the other direction, it's also saying that 172 is at that exact same MAC address. So it's telling this machine that 172 is at this MAC address, but it's telling the other machine at the same time, let me make this back smaller. At the same time, it's telling a second machine, or the gateway, that 172 is that address. So it's telling 172, hey, I'm the gateway, here's my MAC address. But it's telling .2, hey, I'm 172, here's my MAC address. And if you notice, both of the MAC addresses that it's poisoning or that it's sending out, this is the same MAC address for each one. It's exactly the same, right? And what that is, if we open another terminal here, that MAC address that it's sending out is actually this machine's MAC address itself. And that is where the poison, the ARP poison, happens. Now, if we go and look at the victim again, we can see something that doesn't quite look right there. We can see 172 with a MAC address that's that, and you can also see that 191 appears to have that exact same MAC address in that dynamic ARP entry. And when you see that, it's a very, very, very high likelihood that you're being poisoned. All right, that sets up the ARP poison, and then on top of that is where the DNS poison is possible now. Because as your machine goes out to make a request for Yahoo or Facebook or whatever, that DNS query's got to go through the gateway, or in some cases to the gateway, or in this case, we're between the victim and the gateway. So that DNS query has to essentially come through us. And what's happening is when that query comes across, we're intercepting it essentially with DNS spoof and telling the victim that Facebook is at 191. So that's the breakdown of the attack, and that's what it looks like. And again, anytime you look in your cache and you see this going on, where you have the same MAC address associated with two different IPs, it's probably an issue. It's probably an issue that you need to look at. But that's how this whole attack was set up. The rest of it, with the bringing down the fake copy of Facebook, that was all automated via the Social Engineers Toolkit. And at some point, maybe I'll come do like a whole long video on the Social Engineers Toolkit. But either way, that's the build up to the attack. That's how what you saw in the previous video actually happened. So thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel, do all those things so I can keep making this free content. Thank you.